Parents asked me to leave the house but keep paying the rent so their freeloader GC son can move back in. So I moved out happily and blocked them immediately until I got call from my aunt screaming BC now they can't pay their mortgage without my rent. So, my parents are struggling right now, and I'm always going to be paying for them. However, I'm starting to switch up my tune because it's starting to seem like they're just taking advantage of me. The reason I say that is because they're always enabling my brother. So, you know what I did? I made an ultimatum. I told them, if you're going to enable my brother to move in here, even though he doesn't have a job and can't hold one down to save his life, I'm not going to pay your mortgage anymore unless you do one thing. Put my name on the mortgage, so I'm the owner, since I'm the one paying it anyway. I'll still let everyone live their rent free, but I just need something out of this. Well, you know what my parents decided to tell me? Let me show you. My mother is what most people would call a boy mom. The worst day of her life was the day my brother moved out for college, tied with the day he announced he was engaged. She had loads of fun making herself the center of attention at his wedding. I'm talking full-on wedding gown disguised as a mother of the groom dress. Yeah. But then, he didn't move back in with his wife to make her multi-generational household dreams come true, so she went back to sulking. Now, I'm not saying she's actually doing anything to make him lose his job, but she's definitely been manifesting a reunion with her darling baby boy for years now. The fact that he's flat broke and has nowhere else to go is just semantics, really. That brings me to the reason I'm making this post. I'll be using fake names, in addition to this being a throwaway account, simply because I'm not taking the chance of anyone coming across this and connecting it back to me. I've seen those AI voiceovers on TikTok. I know how many views those can get. Use this in whatever video you want, just don't try to track me down or dox me, okay? So, after a few weeks, my brother Greg lost his job. He lives in Arizona, which is a full day's drive if you don't stop for anything and don't sleep for 24 hours straight. So, it's been a while since we've seen him. Naturally, our mother pounced on the opportunity to get him to move back in with her and be under the same roof for the first time in more than a decade. I can't even imagine he actually wants all that, but I don't think he has much of a choice. His wife, Skylar, doesn't work, which I suspect is because my brother is one of those men provide, women stay at home kind of guys. And mom and dad can't really afford to bankroll him living in another state, especially since neither of them work either. Right after Greg got married and decided to stay in Arizona, dad decided it was time for him to retire since my brother and I are both grown, and I refused to get married. It was just time for me to step up, as a daughter should, and look after my parents. I was like 22, fresh out of college, but I had a good enough job, and my childhood home was a 10-minute drive from work, so I figured, why not? My brother wasn't around to live up to any expectations, anyways. Plus, they were strongly implying that I'd get the house in a few years, since my mom wanted me to move to Arizona to be closer to Greg once he gave her grandchildren. Clearly, that did not work out. In the last 5 years, not only has Greg not given her any grandbabies with Skylar, but he really only calls once a month. The last time I saw him was 2 Thanksgivings ago, when he flew back home for once instead of mom and dad going down to him. He spent the whole weekend complaining about his job, their house, how much he hated work, and pretty much everything else he could think of to go on about. Safe to say, Greg and I do not get along. He's 4 years older than me, so I was only subjected to 14 years of him before he left for college. But pretty much every day before that was just me training to be his perfect little person. Whatever Greg said goes. I did not share any of his toys, I did not pick what movie we watched, I did not pick what we had for dinner. He got presents for every single one of my birthdays, so he wouldn't feel left out. The list just goes on and on. I mean, I was absolutely an accident child, and it was very clear to me that I would never, ever come before Greg. Yeah, things got better after he left. I think mom was just so bored without him around that she turned all her attention toward me. When she wasn't trying to drown him in phone calls and emails, it was a little suffocating, and the comparisons didn't die out completely, but I was the center of attention for the first time in my whole life. So, sue me for making the most of it. I stayed close to home for school, shout out to any UW alums lurking, and I got a pretty sweet gig in the city as a software engineer right after graduating, working for a fellow Husky. My mom actually threw a graduation party for me, which was swiftly overshadowed by Greg announcing his engagement. But still, the next year he got married, and dad retired. It's been 5 years since he did, and he's too busy with his life down in Arizona to bother me too much with his opinions on women working outside of the home, and now how I need to be more of a lady and get married already. I don't know if he realizes that the fact that I haven't gotten married is the only reason he doesn't have to worry about mom and dad, since I'm able to look after them as a direct result of my unladylike choices. The only thing I've really had to deal with is my mother's super frequent breakdowns about her son living so far away, or the fact that he hasn't even given her any grandchildren, or the fact that Skylar must be convincing him to stay away, which she isn't. I don't think she's a bad person. She seems to actually like my family, for whatever reason. Update, Part 2. Now, with Greg recently unemployed and Skylar being a stay-at-home wife with no work experience, they don't have any money. Despite Phoenix being cheaper than Seattle, they really won't be able to afford to stick around there for much longer without any income. Since Greg has been striking out on the job hunt, my mom strongly suggested that they move back home. I think Skylar's the one who pushed him to accept, actually. Greg might be a self-centered jerk who thinks he's owed the world on a silver platter, but even he can't stand mom smothering him for too long without feeling suffocated. Still, he didn't have any better offers. Though, considering how much he hated his last job, I don't think he really looked all that hard for other options, if I'm being honest. Important side note, about 4 years ago, after a solid year of leaving Greg's bedroom untouched like some kind of golden child shrine after he got married and didn't move back in, so almost 9 years altogether, my dad converted the room into a private yoga studio for my mom, who religiously practices yoga. Of course, he did not anticipate the meltdown over tearing down her precious Greg shrine, but she did get over it enough to eventually start using the space. It's actually one of the things we were able to bond over after Greg left. I was a cheerleader, and yoga kept me flexible all through high school, so I was happy to pick it back up with her at home. Here's the thing though, a yoga studio means one less bedroom. While that's all well and good when it's just my parents and me here, Greg and Skylar moving in makes things a bit more complicated. I mean, when they came down for Thanksgiving that one time, I was relegated to the couch for the duration of their stay. One weekend on the couch is fine, but them moving in long term meant a more permanent solution would be needed. When my parents asked me to talk about Greg moving back in, I honestly just expected them to ask me to pay for the yoga studio in the basement to be turned back into a bedroom, maybe tricked out a little more as a small granny suite so Greg and Skylar had their own space. I've been paying rent ever since I took over as the breadwinner and the only employed member of the family to cover all the bills and give my parents some spending money. But renovating the basement would definitely cost more than they could cover with that. If that's exactly what they asked me to do, I would have done it. That wasn't what they asked for, though. My mom made it very clear that since we didn't have enough space, the best thing for me to do was move out. Since I was getting older, she said it was time for me to leave the house and meet a good man. And with Greg and Skylar around, it would get too crowded, especially if they started having kids, which my mom was really hoping they would. Here's the kicker, they didn't just want me to move out. They wanted me to keep paying rent, for everything. Since Greg didn't have a job and would probably take some time to find one, and even after he did, I should uphold my duty as their daughter and continue supporting them. After all, Greg would soon have his own children to support, if my mom got her way. They want me to leave the house so Greg can move in. They want me to keep paying for everything while he freeloads on my money, and meanwhile, I have to go look for a new place to live. I'm not going to get into everything I'm feeling right now, other than to say I'm beyond hurt, and yeah, angry as hell. I think my dad could tell I was about to explode, because he told me to take some time to think about it and quickly ushered my mom away. I've taken a day so far, and I've done nothing but think about the fact that my parents, after all this time, are still willing to put my brother first. I've spent years of my life supporting them, all while he's been gallivanting on the other side of the country, not even bothering to return their calls. How do I even react to this? Do I refuse and have them hate me forever, or do I leave and hate myself? Update number 1. Okay, wow. I was not expecting my post to get any real attention, but apparently, there are more people out there with dysfunctional families than I thought. A lot of you have left comments and sent me DMs, so before I get into my big update, which I think is a big deal, I'll address some of those. This might be a little sappy, but thank you to everyone who took the time to leave a comment, other than the people who told me that women have no place in the workplace and every single creep in the Pacific Northwest who converged on my DMs like a swarm of vultures. I do appreciate those of you who gave me some real, sane advice. I actually decided to listen to it. I always knew my mom liked Greg better. I just always knew he was her perfect little golden boy while I was just there. But things have been good since he moved out. I was 14 when he left, and it's been 13 years now. I've lived almost as long without him as I did with him. But even once he was 3 states away, I was still living in his shadow. Part of me has always known, and gosh, he knows it. I've had my share of friends and boyfriends tell me so, but I wanted so badly to believe that my parents, my mom especially, could see me as good enough that I overlooked it. I couldn't do that anymore, not with that favoritism being thrown right in my face after half a decade of supporting them single-handedly. They wanted me to move out, so I did. I got an apartment within walking distance of my work, which has actually been amazing for my fresh air and vitamin D. It was fully furnished, and I moved in immediately. I thought I'd have to go through great lengths to keep the address from my parents, but they didn't even bother. It hurts, but it gave me the push I needed to see my plan through. You know, the night I moved out, the last of my stuff, along with my very important documents, including my birth certificate and social security card, thank you to the comment section for telling me to do that at the stroke of midnight. Because I'm a drama queen at heart, I blocked my parents and brother on every single platform I could think of, even LinkedIn, which I didn't know was possible until then. Greg isn't even in Washington yet, so it might have been a little early, but I felt like if I put it off for even a little while, I'd get complacent and let myself keep living in his shadow. I needed to get out while I could, while the sting of my parents' favoritism was the most painful. It sucks, yeah, and some days it still sucks, but it's getting better. It'll be a week tomorrow, and it's honestly been good for me. Aside from walking to work in the morning, I've also just been feeling a sense of peace that I never knew I was missing. I can't lounge around the house without being afraid that my mother's going to insult my posture or tear into me for leaving a mug on the table. Maybe it hasn't been long enough to say for sure, but I think things are actually going well. Update, Part 3. Alright, so I spoke too soon. Maybe I jinxed it. Like way too many of you said, seriously, guys, this is a superstitious place where neckbeards come to congregate, insult anyone who knows their rising sign, and generally complain about everything. I digress. Do you want to know something I just found out after a 2-hour phone call that I'm pretty sure blew out my right eardrum? Apparently, Greg lost his job months ago, not weeks ago like I had been told. No, he lost his job near the beginning of the year. Now, Arizona might not be the most expensive place in the country, but it sure as hell is not the cheapest. So, you might be wondering how Greg and Skylar have been living there for months without any income at all. I was sure I knew. Until we got to fun fact number 2, my parents took out a second mortgage on the house to give money to Greg. I've been paying their mortgage ever since, thinking I was being an amazing daughter by giving them more money each month after my promotion. But they had gone and remortgaged the house they had promised to leave to me, giving all the money to the guy who hightailed it out of the state after high school. Do you know what happens when you miss your mortgage payment? The bank takes your home, foreclosure. That's a real thing. One that my parents failed to consider until they burned through their meager savings, whatever they hadn't spent on or sent to dear Greg, and realized they wouldn't be able to make the mortgage payment. Greg and Skylar have already moved in, but they're definitely not going to be able to help. So now, 4 people are living in that house, all unemployed, with only a month's worth of mortgage money left. As she does, my mom called my Aunt Jasmine to complain. Aunt Jasmine's technically my great aunt, but she's only 63, which is barely older than my mom. She's the only family we have left in Washington, and my mom kind of hates her. Aunt Jasmine's an actual hoarder and sticks her nose in everyone's business, while my mom is a clean freak who also loves butting into people's lives. It's a match made in both heaven and hell. They still talk all the time, though, since she's the only family we've got. Aunt Jasmine's really big on family sticks together. Hearing that quote, I'd abandon my family, she decided to call me up and tear me a new one. In her words, I left them on the cusp of homelessness and without a penny to rub together. That's how I found out about the whole mortgage thing, by the way, how they can't afford it without me. The way she sees it, the only thing for me to do is give them as much money as they need and hope they can find it in themselves to forgive me. The way I see it, they can eat dirt. Well, mostly. The other half of me is ridden with guilt and slowly driving me insane. Hence, my return to these interwebs after 2 months of peace. Hopefully, reading enough comments telling me to cut them off will give me the nerve to actually stick with it. Hey, guys. Well, you're either going to upvote me to the heavens or tear me a new one in the comments below. But hear me out before you comment anything. I'll leave a bit of information for those of you who are typing anyway. I paid my parents a visit. I may not have appreciated being yelled at by Aunt Jasmine for 2 hours straight, but the part of me that was twisting with guilt was seriously impacting the stress-free environment I've been trying to build for myself. So, I decided to do something about it. You'll be happy to hear that I've gained some self-respect since I last saw my parents. Maybe it was the distance. Maybe it was the fact they hadn't bothered to contact me before realizing they were running out of money, and the only thing they did notice was that I'd blocked them. But I wasn't going to let them walk all over me the second Greg reared his ugly head. Especially if I was going to be saving their skin and keeping them off the street. Doing so meant coming face to face with my brother for the first time in 2 years. This time, though, he was not sloshed on Thanksgiving-themed cocktails. Sober Greg is about as fun as you'd imagine. Skylar, she was fine, like she always is. I still don't know why she married him, but it doesn't really matter. I wasn't there to dissect their marriage, I was there to buy a home. I think I mentioned this in my original post, but honestly, I can't be bothered to go back and check. If I didn't, well. Oh well. My parents were very strongly implying that, since Greg had moved out, I'd be getting the house once he had kids, since our mother wanted to be closer to her grandbabies. Some of you will call me an idiot for not getting that in writing, but it was good enough for me at the time. It's not anymore, though. I went to my parents' house not with the intention of simply paying their mortgage and letting them play house with their golden child. They could still do that for all I cared, but I wanted the house title in return. I'd already been paying the mortgage anyway, and I would continue to do so, but not for nothing. I could certainly afford it, and they definitely couldn't. I had one condition. Greg would have to pay his and Skylar's bills once he got a job. Nothing extreme, nowhere near the amount I'd be paying in rent. Just enough to cover his share of the utilities and such. I would continue covering all our parents' expenses. I actually think they were open to the idea, until Greg started yelling about me trying to steal his inheritance, calling me a conniving little bee and a few other more creative insults that, out of context, I might have actually found funny. He went on long enough to send Skylar running out of the room, close to tears. Then he turned to our parents and straight up told them they would not be accepting my offer. If you think they disagreed, even for a second, I have not done a good enough job explaining just how under Greg's thumb they are. So, yeah, I won't be getting the house. Sucks, for sure, but I don't think they're going to be getting it much longer, either. I'm pretty sure the period for non-payment is like 4 months before the bank starts the process of taking your home. They're either going to give me a call then, or they're going to lose the house. For my own mental health, I don't care either way. Update. Part 4. Alright, so I spoke too soon. Maybe I jinxed it. Like many of you said, seriously, guys, this place is superstitious as hell. It's the kind of place where neckbeards congregate to insult anyone who knows their rising sign. I digress. Do you want to know something I just found out via a 2-hour phone call that I'm pretty sure blew out my right eardrum? Apparently, Greg lost his job months ago, not weeks ago like I'd been told. No, he lost his job near the beginning of the year. Now, Arizona might not be the most expensive place in the country, per se, but it sure as hell isn't the cheapest. So, you might be wondering how on earth Greg and Skylar have been living there for months without any income at all. Well, Here's a fun fact. My parents took out a second mortgage on the house to give money to Greg. I've been paying their mortgage ever since, and here I was thinking I was being an amazing daughter by giving them more money every month after my promotion. They'd gone and remortgaged the house that they claimed they'd be leaving to me, and given all the money to the guy who hightailed it out of the state after high school. Do you know what happens when you miss a mortgage payment? The bank takes your home. Foreclosure. That's a real thing, one that my parents failed to consider until they started burning through their meager savings, whatever they had left after sending money to dear Greg, that I'd given them over the years. They realized they wouldn't be able to make the mortgage payment. Greg and Skylar have already moved in, but they're definitely not going to be able to help. So, there are now 4 people living in that house, all unemployed, with only a month of mortgage money left. As usual, my mom called Aunt Jasmine to complain. She's technically my great aunt, but she's 63, which is barely older than my mom. She's the only family we've got here in Washington. My mom kind of hates her. Aunt Jasmine's an actual hoarder and sticks her nose in everyone's business, and Mom's a clean freak who also sticks her nose in people's business, so it's a match made in both heaven and hell. Still, they talk all the time because, again, she's the only family we've got here, and Aunt Jasmine's really big on the idea that family sticks together. Aunt Jasmine, hearing that I abandoned my family, decided to call me up and tear me a new one. In her words, I left them on the cusp of homelessness and without a penny to rub together. That's how I found out about the whole mortgage thing, by the way, and how they can't afford it without me. That's how she sees it. The only thing for me to do is give them as much money as they need and hope they can forgive me. The way I see it? They can eat dirt. Well, mostly. The other half of me is riddled with guilt and slowly driving me insane, hence my return to these interwebs after 2 months of peace. Hopefully, reading enough comments telling me to cut them off will give me the nerve to actually stick with it. Hey, guys. Well, you're either going to upvote me to the heavens or tear me a new one in the comment section below, but hear me out before you comment anything. Alright, I'll leave a little bit of information for those of you who are typing anyway. I paid my parents a visit. I may not have appreciated being yelled at by Aunt Jasmine for 2 hours straight, but the part of me that was twisting with guilt was seriously impacting the stress-free environment I'd begun to build for myself. So, I decided to do something about it. However, you'll be happy to hear that I've gained some self-respect since I last saw my parents. Maybe it was the distance, maybe it was the fact that they hadn't bothered to contact me before realizing they were running out of money. The only thing they did notice was that I blocked them, but I wasn't going to let them walk all over me the second Greg reared his ugly head again, especially if I was going to be saving their skin and keeping them off the street. Doing so did mean coming face to face with my brother for the first time in 2 years. This time, he wasn't sloshed on Thanksgiving-themed cocktails. Sober Greg is about as fun as you would imagine. Skylar, she was fine, like she always is. I still don't know why she married him, but it doesn't really matter. I wasn't there to dissect their marriage, I was there to buy a home. I think I mentioned this in my original post, I really can't be bothered to go back and check, so if I didn't, oh well. But my parents were strongly implying that, since Greg had moved out, I'd be getting the house once he had kids. Since our mother wanted to be closer to her grandbabies. Some of you will call me an idiot for not getting this in writing, but it was good enough for me at the time. It wasn't good enough anymore, though. I went to my parents' house, not with the intention of simply paying their mortgage and letting them play house with their golden child. They could still do that for all I cared, but I wanted the house title in return. I'd already been paying the mortgage anyway, and I would continue to do so, but not for nothing. I could certainly afford it. They definitely couldn't. I had one condition: Greg would have to pay his and Skylar's bills once he gets a job. Nothing extreme, nowhere near the amount I'd be paying in rent, just enough to cover his share of the utilities and such. I would continue covering all our parents' expenses. I actually think they seemed open to the idea until Greg started yelling about me trying to steal his inheritance and being a conniving little, female dog, and other more creative insults that I might have actually found funny out of context. He went on long enough to send Skylar running out of the room, close to tears, and then he turned to our parents and straight up told them they would not be accepting my offer. If you think they disagreed even for a second, I have not done a good enough job explaining just how under his thumb they are. So yeah, I won't be getting the house. Sucks, for sure. But I don't think they're going to be getting the house for much longer either. I'm pretty sure the period for non-payment is like 4 months before the bank starts the process of taking your home. They're either going to give me a call then, or they're going to lose the house. For my own mental health, I don't care either way. Wow, it's been 4 months since my last update, so you might want to go back and have a bit of a refresher. But here's a quick bit of info. After my brother Greg convinced our parents that they shouldn't take my very generous offer, if I do say so myself, to buy over the house and let them live in it while Greg just covers his and Skylar's bills, I decided to just leave them to their own devices for a bit. I was serious when I said I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. Plus, I mostly figured that my parents didn't really have another option. Final update, Part 5. Aunt Jasmine might shout herself hoarse about supporting family, but she can't really afford to pay for the mortgage on top of her own disaster of a home. Short of taking them in, which I'm sure Mom would never willingly agree to the idea that there wasn't anything she could do sooner, but then, sooner than expected, I got a call. The only surprising part was that it wasn't my mom calling me, it was Skylar. The poor thing could barely get any words out. She was clearly in the throes of a panic attack when she called, so it took a while to calm her down enough for some semblance of coherence. She'd had a huge blowout fight with my brother, who was still unwilling to budge after they got a letter from the bank. She knew that my offer was their best bet to avoid homelessness. Skylar didn't have a job. She went to college, but she never worked a day in her life because Greg just never wanted her to, and her parents had disapproved so much that she hadn't spoken to them in years. She'd been searching for a job ever since Greg lost his, but when she found out, he freaked out on her, and now she didn't have a chance. She begged me to go through with my offer to buy the house and have them pay their bills, even if Greg refused. I decided to try. I figured if I had nothing to lose, best case I get a house out of this, worst case I wash my hands of the whole thing and move on with my life. It would stink a little, but I'd get over it. So I went back home and offered to buy the house again. This time, the deal was a little different. I still wanted the house, that didn't change. In return for continuing to pay the mortgage and allowing my parents to keep living there, I wanted the deed to the house and the title to be in my name. However, Greg would have to do more than just pay his share of the bills. Why should he get away with only paying a few hundred a month after all the grief he'd given me for trying to help him? I wasn't going to make myself a martyr this time. I wanted him to match the same amount of rent that I'd been paying since I was 22. Would that cover the entire mortgage? Sure, but I'd still be covering the extra bills and all of our parents' additional expenses. I didn't think it was unfair at all. He did not share that opinion, but evidently, the letter from the bank warning them about missing any more payments made my parents desperate enough to agree anyway. So, to make a long story short, I'm now the proud owner of a beautiful Seattle townhouse. Actually, I think I'm a landlord officially, since I'm still expecting that rent payment. I told Greg he had a month to pony up the money, or I'm sending him packing. I don't care if he goes or where he goes. Skylar's welcome to stay, though, if she wants to. She might have married him, but I'm not going to make her homeless just to prove a point. He can be homeless on his own if that's what he wants. Place your bets on whether you think he'll actually pay. I might reply once I find out, but I'm not really planning to update this again. The month ended. Yes, I know it's been like 3 months, but I've been busy, okay? And as many of you predicted, Greg did not pay the rent. I feel like he probably expected me to just quietly roll over like an obedient little sister and not say a word about it, but that's not who I am. I'm done playing second fiddle to whatever he wants. I made good on my promise that I'd evict him. At least, I started the process officially, and my parents immediately tried to fight me on it. Evidently, they had also expected me to just let Greg get away with whatever he wanted now that I had the house title, but they were wrong. I meant it when I said I was done. If they wanted to protect him, they could go with him. They would not be doing anything in my house. I started the process to evict them too. Before the whole thing could actually go through, they realized I was being serious and packed up their stuff. They ran off to Aunt Jasmine's house. She might be a hoarder, but she's a dead-set traditionalist who thinks family should always come first. Even if she and my mother can't be in the same room for more than an hour without wanting to tear each other's heads off, she took them in. Mom's a complete neat freak, so I'm sure she's having a great time in that home of a woman who spent the last 60 years refusing to throw anything away. Dad got a job at a body shop nearby to keep them afloat, which doesn't pay anywhere near as much as he used to make as a mechanic back in the day, but enough to keep the lights on with Aunt Jasmine having 3 new mouths to feed. Obviously, Greg went with them. Skylar did not. She kept pushing and pushing for him to actually pay the rent for their last month here. He refused. They got into so many screaming matches about it that the neighbors actually called me to ask if everything was okay. She left the day I served him the eviction notice. Her parents hated Greg and her decision to marry him, so I'm sure they were more than happy to take her in. Plus, she's even younger than me, and she's got the rest of her life ahead of her. Between the degree she already has and finally being Greg-free, I'm sure she'll be more than fine. Well, the same can't be said for Greg. Maybe he'll find a job eventually, although that'll be significantly harder in the middle of nowhere where Aunt Jasmine lives than here in a nice big city. Anyways, that's it. See you.
Asterisk after listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. ****